What's up, guys? Today we're going to be talking about Grimdark. That's right. Now, Grimdark is my favorite subgenre in fantasy. It's really the reason why I became such an avid fantasy reader. So it's definitely got a place near and dear to my black heart. Now, the thing is, with Grimdark, it's massively subjective. So it makes it kind of hard to nail down on what it just is, right? Like, everybody's got their own opinions, their own, kind of idea what Grimdark is. And it's not really right or wrong. We could argue all day long about what is and what isn't until we're blue in the face, and neither of us would be right or wrong. But these are things I still love to talk about, love to debate. But the thing is, I love this subgenre, and I would love to try to maybe make some things a little clear. One thing I see a lot, when people are recommending grimdark stories, I feel like maybe the match is not there. They're just kind of going off of, oh, it's grimdark. But there are, certain aspects of grimdark that are different from others. So this video is really just going to be set up as a guide for grimdark. Kind of gonna recommend certain books for certain reasons, kind of go over the history of some. By all means, this is not prerequisites. I'm not a gatekeeper. This is just trying to help clarify some of that tricky subgenre for you, the reader. All right, let's get into it. Okay, so first off, let's just kind of figure out, where does grimdark come from? Where did this name, where did we get the coinage? Right? And it comes from Warhammer 40k. And I'm trying to remember the quote. Oh, man. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. Now, basically, this, paints a picture of just a nihilistic universe or worlds, where no matter what, we're always at battle, right? And so I feel like the one book series that would represent this just to a T is without a doubt The Black Company by Glenn Cook. Now this series spans 10 books, plus there's other entries that are newer, whether you count those or not, but either way, The Black Company is just a perfect example of worlds at war nonstop, and it does have that nihilistic tone, right? Because no matter what you do, it's just on to the next battle. As well as, Glenn Cook has really, a lot of people, herald him as the grandfather of Grimdark. Well, that's up, obviously to be disputed, but without a doubt, The Black Company is a very dark series. It is imaginative. But yeah, a dark military fantasy series that really represents where this grimdark name came from. Next up, I want to talk about a category because I want to branch out and just, kind of throw some recommendations at you guys that aren't just from my perspective. I've added some stuff in here that I know is well loved. And I want to, bring it to the table because also it might be books that I don't consider grimdark, but some do. But for what I'm going to try to, clarify it by putting them in this category where we're going to call it Grimheart. Now, Grimheart books are going to kind of represent these grimdark stories that aren't technically grimdark stories. They're more adjacent works. And mostly because somewhere deep down, these stories are way more about heart or heroes than they are about, being dark, dastardly, cool, and edgy. So starting us out, I would say, without a doubt, the first one that pops to mind is going to be Traitor's Blade and really the Greatcoats series by Sebastian de Castel. Now, this is a great example of Grimheart because you have this Three Musketeers style fantasy, but it's got plenty of adult themes in there. There's drugs, rape and murder, stabbing people in the neck. But when you all boil it down, your heroes are rough around the edges, and they're violent as well. But when you boil it down, they are trying to make this world a better place. Like, that's when you grind them down to the core, that's what their actions, their motivations are, bettering the world. Another series I would put in the Grimheart category, and it's one that's well loved by many, and those that know me know I've had trouble with it, but that doesn't mean that this is not obviously a great series and also a great representation, right, of Grimheart books, because it does have some dark stuff, but at the core, there's a lot about friendship here. And of course, we're talking about the Gentleman Bastard series by Scott Lynch, starting with The Lies of Locke Lamora. Now, like I said, for those that know me, I DNF'd The Lies of Locke Lamora. I've tried a couple times. I've got about one more try left in me. But by all means, what I did read, there was some grimdark elements, especially like that underground orphanage and just, the elements of that grimdark fuckery was there. But at the same time, for whatever reason, I'm not getting into that. We'll just say that this series is heralded as, containing one of the best, examples of friendship, the bond of friendship. I think that most avid readers or fans of this series would tell you that it contains one of the best friendships in all of fantasy. So by all means, the Gentleman Bastard series should be mentioned for, a great choice if you're trying to choose within the Grimheart category. Another great recommendation for the Grimheart category would be Ben Galli's Chasing Graves trilogy. This is a trilogy that is complete. It's out there, so you could binge it. But also, it's, it really does deserve a place and mention here in the Grimheart category, because Ben Galli has a way of bringing you a very sinister and just dark theme, but wrapping it and injecting it with such levity that you just enjoy these dark, dastardly moments in a lighthearted way. So by all means, I think that is another thing. It's not just about, heroes and friendship. Maybe it's also about being able to capture that super dark theme in such a light way. So by all means, Chasing Graves trilogy by Ben Galli. My last mention for the Grimheart category would be David Ragg's The Blackhawks. Now, the Blackhawks is definitely something that I could see people being like, oh, it's grimdark, because it's got very heightened violence and blood, as well as just that foul-mouthed fuckery from beginning to end. But when you boil it down, once again, you have Vendrin Shell, who is, he's a knight. He has the heart of a knight, a reluctant one maybe, but still it's there in spades. And I felt like that really shined through, which gives that book a much lighter tone if you're asking me, even with all the blood and violence. But yes, still, it's an amazing ride. And the reason why I really want to suggest it as well is because the Articles of Faith, I believe it's going to be a duology, is just, it's currently going. I know that the Gentleman Bastard series is ongoing as well, but this is, in case somebody's trying to get in on something that's current and happening right now that's just really started, I would say The Blackhawks by David Ragg is a perfect place to start. So the next category, if you will, that I want to kind of recommend and just kind of highlight is one that Grimdark is known for, and that's the first-person narrative with a fast-paced story with plenty of violence coming at you, right? That's almost like a Grimdark trope in some ways. So I just want to let's make a good little recommendation list of who and why for fast-paced, first-person grimdark books. So first, I would like to just recommend Priest of Bones by Peter McLean. Now, this is because you will get the first-person narrative of Thomas Piety. Now, Priest of Bones and the War of the Rose Throne series is a lot like Peaky Blinders, and I know a lot of people like that. So think about this as kind of like a low fantasy Peaky Blinders, and you're going to get that kind of a very cold back alley business brain of Thomas Piety. You will also get to touch on things because we will learn throughout the story that, our player, Thomas Piety, comes from a very troubled past We will find out things like child abuse, have really affected the way he conducts himself here as a man. But certainly those kinds of things might be too much for some. Some people just don't want to, read anything about child abuse. But my argument would be, that sometimes, fiction is our only safe place to, mess around with these sensitive subjects. And I'm certainly Priest of Bones does do that a little bit. But, nonetheless, I think this should be recommended because Thomas Piety is a great first-person narrative for somebody trying to get into Grimdark. Priest of Bones is very fast-paced, jumping from plot point to plot point, giving you good, gritty characters, plenty of blood and grit. Next up, I would recommend Lowtown by Daniel Polanski, and really the Lowtown series here, because what Daniel Polanski has is something that is it's very reminiscent of something like Priest of Bones or Prince of Thorns, but it's edgy and gritty, but it's not over. I don't feel like it crosses the line anywhere. There are some dark themes. You're going to see drug abuse. There's death of children. By all means, the warden is not a good guy, but he is somebody that we could tell at one point was somebody that was a good person, that he hangs on to maybe little bits of threads of that, but at the same time, he's kind of been forced into a situation where he's just had to make the best of that situation, and that is, being a drug dealer in the shittiest part of the neighborhood, and then now all of a sudden having to deal with, bodies of dead children. This series or at least this book, Lowtown, it really will hit you with some of that very visceral, gritty violence, as well as some of that magic in here is really dark as well, kind of reminiscent of Lovecraft, and I feel like that's a beautiful thing for Grimdark because I do think that Grimdark pulls from horror elements. So I do think that The Warden and the Lowtown series by Daniel Polanski is a great recommendation for someone trying to get into Grimdark first person. Now, if you're looking to get in on something that's new and happening right now as far as Grimdark first person, I don't think that there's a better decision to make than going with Blackstone Heart by Michael R. Fletcher. Now, this is book number 1 in the Obsidian Path series, and we're about to get book number 2 very, very soon. And that is exciting. But the thing is, one of the reasons why this is such a strong recommendation for Grimdark first person is that the character of Crayon is amazing. The fact that we start out with Crayon and he has no idea who he is, he has no memories, he's literally working off of instinct. This gives the reader such a clean slate with a character. We really get to feel everything, every decision, every feeling. We will see the lows, the highs. We will agree, we will argue with him. It's just such a perfect example of a first-person Grimdark character because it really does cover, what is it to be dark? Can we even change it once we are? The prices that one would pay for power, all this stuff that is just the epitome of Grimdark is in this book, and I can't wait to carry on with this series. So yes, by all means, the Obsidian Path series by Michael R. Fletcher is a fantastic recommendation for first-person Grimdark. Now, last but not least, obviously, for the first-person category, we're going with, Prince of Thorns, the Broken Empire trilogy by Mark Lawrence. Guys, this to me is the epitome of the first-person Grimdark narrative. I know it crosses the line and just goes a little too far for some. Personally, I just think, if I was going to throw somebody in, to the Grimdark deep end, this is where I would throw them in because it's structured and paced for you to get through it. It won't bog you down with a bunch of shit, but it will give you the willies. It'll make your stomach churn, and it'll do all that. But you know why? Because we are in the head of Jorg Ancrath, and that is a wild ride. For those that don't know, this whole thing kind of came out of Mark Lawrence deciding that he wanted to see what would happen if you took a character much like Alex from A Clockwork Orange and put him in a fantasy setting. So what this does really is, much like other authors in their deconstruction of fantasy tropes, this really is the deconstruction of the fantasy protagonist. And we are just, we're spending time inside the head of Jorg Ankrath, who is not a psychopath and he's not a sociopath. He is just he's a cold, calculating young man who is just, he's somewhat a product of his own environment, right? His time in the Thorns and his experience here in the Broken Empire has literally shaped him into the thorn that is now stabbing into the Broken Empire's side. But, like I said, guys, I can't really recommend it enough. I do understand that this is going to push the boundaries too far for some, but just by all means, I feel like if you want to understand Grimdark and just how dastardly it can be, the Prince of Thorns book and just the Broken Empire trilogy is amazing. And it really is set up fast-paced. Actually, the pacing on the trilogy is really, really well done because Prince of Thorns is like a bullet train. It sends you through that first installment into King, which is, vastly different than Prince, but just amazing writing. And it really starts to begin to flesh this thing out into a little bit more, but it still is just a very visceral ride that is fast-paced and just kick-ass, guys. So, yeah, can't recommend it enough. Mark Lawrence's Broken Empire trilogy. The next category I want to talk about is morally gray characters, because this is the category that really, let's face it, most people just consider Grimdark. When they think Grimdark, they think morally gray characters and maybe not much else. And this is one of the reasons why I wanted to do this, Grimdark guide, because in case you're somebody that's searching for a morally gray character, somebody's sending you, the recommendation with a book that has just the nastiest of motherfuckers in it, doesn't help you a whole lot and might confuse you further on this already confusing subgenre, right? Right. So I'm trying to put together just a little quick list here of books, series, trilogies, of which I think just, really do sum up that whole deal of grimdark, morally gray characters, so if you're looking for them, this is where you can find them. So first off, I'm going to keep with Mark Lawrence and just talk about his Red Queen's War trilogy, because this is something I'm actually surprised is not more like, highly, talked about and just, shared and celebrated, because it's brilliant, and I think that lots of people will love it and be able to get behind it, and because of the morally gray character being fleshed out so well. Jalen Kendith is a coward. He's a misogynist, you know what I mean? But the way that Lawrence paints him is in such a comical way. It is loads of fun. You will literally probably, have your stomach hurting from laughing while reading this trilogy. It's a perfect example of a morally gray character, one that you can get behind and, root for, one that is not too dastardly and one that doesn't cross the lines. He just kind of, stands right there on the line, tap dances on it some, but never really goes over fully to the dark side, which makes most readers, they can digest this kind of grimdark much easier than something like Broken Empire. So yes, by all means, The Red Queen's War by Mark Lawrence is a great example of morally gray characters for grimdark reads. Now, we cannot talk about this category without bringing up Joe Abercrombie. I mean, he's the master of the morally gray character to most, right? He certainly has a way of writing scoundrels, such dastardly dudes that people get behind. Honestly, you know what I mean? Like, how many people write a torturer that have, people hand over fist shouting, praise about? It's pretty nutty. So by all means, Joe Abercrombie needs to make this list. So we will talk about the First Law trilogy. And guys, also I would say, try to treat maybe Joe Abercrombie's work more like a series, less like a trilogy, standalones, another trilogy. Realistically, it's in your best interest to follow Joe Abercrombie like through publication date. It will literally give you everything you need going into each other's story. But why is this such a great pick, such a great recommendation? Like I said, Joe Abercrombie is a master at fleshing out characters. He's literally, to some, the Grimdark's gold standard. That's just the way it is. When they hear Grimdark, they just think Joe Abercrombie, just like they think morally gray characters. I do think that this is a strong recommendation and very important, though, too, because, look, guys, Joe Abercrombie, Lord Grimdark, right? But he is one of those authors that we have to give, praise to for really, being a part of creating this subgenre, and part of that came out of flipping tropes on their asses, and Joe Abercrombie is the master of it. And the First Law trilogy is really a deconstruction of the fantasy quest trope, which is a hard thing to do to make enjoyable at the same time. And I'm sure there will be, some arguments of the ending of the first trilogy and whatnot, but nonetheless, no one can make me see it any other way. That shit is genius, and Joe Abercrombie's First Law books are the best when it comes to morally gray characters. Now, this last recommendation might be, pushing it somewhat for morally gray characters, but I do think that this is where it belongs. And I want to talk about Michael R. Fletcher's Beyond Redemption and the Manifest Delusions series. Now, I say it's pushing it, guys, because these characters could easily be argued that they have no redemption value whatsoever. In fact, look at the first book's name, Beyond Redemption. But I would say if you travel a little further into that series, especially just into book 2, there is quite a bit of change in your characters. You will see there is redemption value. Maybe it is only little, but sometimes when a character has like no redemption value, when they do just one little thing, it shines bright. And I feel like there is a lot of those moments in The Mirror's Truth. But either way, these characters are fantastic. They are dastardly, dark as fuck, and they are just steeped in the most twisted of humor. It's great, guys. I do think that these characters might be a little bit too much for some, but by all means, if you're feeling like you're ready to wade out into that deep end of the morally gray characters, this is as deep as it gets, man. The Manifest Delusions series by Michael R. Fletcher. And kind of segueing off of that, let's go into our last category, which we'll just call the deep end. So guys, the deep end is going to kind of represent, obviously, some of the darkest stuff that the subgenre has to offer, but also not just that. The deep end as far as also for readers. These books represent dark and dastardly reads that are actually also very advanced in writing. The prose are very intelligent, strong, hard-hitting, but not always so straightforward and easy to digest. One dare say that they are dense. The first one of these bad boys I want to talk about is Richard K. Morgan's A Land Fit for Heroes trilogy. Because, guys, this thing is brutal. Morgan is no joke. He is a fantastic writer. He is very intelligent when he writes. Some of his metaphors might go over your head, and you might have to read them a couple times. Some of his concepts are out there. This is like Michael Moorcock on steroids, and then just, dropped all kinds of blood and guts on it and some other dark shit. I don't know. But it is a madman's masterpiece. It is not exactly easy to digest, like I'm saying, but it is by all means a must-need for a recommendation into the deep end of Grimdark. Richard K. Morgan, not only that, this timeline of this trilogy is also around the same time you got the Prince of Nothing, the First Law. All this stuff is really what helped create Grimdark, guys. And, Richard K. Morgan's deconstruction of the happy ending definitely plays through here at the end of Dark Defiles, which I just finished. But yeah, like I said, guys, this thing is crazy. It is dark and it is written intelligently. So, readers beware. Now, the last one on my list should not be any surprise to you. This is the recommendation of recommendations for the deep end of Grimdark, and that is R. Scott Baker's The Prince of Nothing trilogy, The Darkness That Comes Before, The Warrior Prophet, and The Thousandfold Thought. Whoo, guys, you don't even have to go back and see my reviews if you haven't seen them, because you could probably tell right now on my face, this is the masterpiece. This thing is crazy deep end grimdark. You're talking about things that are just so, it's very steeped in nihilism, but it's just also going to hit on the human condition, and it will make you doubt. You know what I mean? This thing is just chocked full of belief, but as the reader, you will be filled with doubt the further you push into this trilogy. It is amazing. It has the ability to just really, blow your mind and change things for you. But it is also dark and dastardly. It might not be as graphic as something that Richard K. Morgan will throw at you, but it is it's on a massive scale. So in many ways, it is darker than the stuff that Richard K. Morgan's throwing at you. Richard K. Morgan is just really putting it this close in your face, where, Baker has kind of zoomed out and shown you this gigantic picture, and it's all bloody and dark and fucked up and just the greatest shit I've ever read. So, by all means, yes, the Prince of Nothing trilogy is the deep end recommendation for Grimdark, guys. I do know that it will be too dark for some, just like Land Fit for Heroes, but for those that are willing to go out and wade around in the deep end of Grimdark, I just feel like you'll get the payoff. You will be paid in dividends, man. Once you come out of that fucking deep end, you're going to have a whole new bathing suit on. One that's just made of pure chaos and torment and kicking kittens and whatever else Grimdark is all about. Well, all right, guys. Hopefully this was somewhat entertaining, somewhat informative. That's actually the most important thing. I like to joke around a lot, but I am here trying to help a little bit. Hopefully I've made some things a little bit more clear, but also, by all means, feel free to drop a question or comment down in the comment section. If I know something that can help you out as a slow, struggling, or just any kind of reader, man, I'll always try to do my best, guys. That's what this video was for, was to, have a little fun, but also try to help the reader, right? All right. So, as always, guys, also, I want to just, real quick, I know I already said it, but guys, just don't take this stuff, you know what I mean? I know I champion a lot of Grimdark, right? But by all means, I am not Lord Grimdark. I'm not the gatekeeper. You don't have to read this stuff to be a Grimdark fan. This is just a way for me to kind of clear some of the air and maybe make a choice for you a little bit easier. That is all, okay? I think it's kind of ridiculous I even got to throw this in. Maybe I'll edit it out. Maybe I won't. I don't know. As always, guys, thanks for spending some time down here at the channel. And to you, and you, and you, a gadoosh. Good luck, all right? Get out there, get your Grimdark on. You know what I mean? Don't be afraid to get a little dirt on you, a little blood and guts. Never hurt nobody. It did, didn't it? Yeah, well, maybe it did hurt somebody, but they probably fucking deserved it. All right. You guys know what time it is. Peace.